welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
My name is Rich.
Oh, that was nice and calm.
Very official, wasn't it?
I've said this before. Like, as in, I think that I like the official ones and I like the calm ones, but I also miss like the gravy rich ones also as well. Like,
I set a high bar early on and have not met it.
I think we're probably doing with the podcast in general. Like, as if, it's like this is going really well, and
now we just sound tired.
Yeah, we were just talking about relationships a minute ago, like before we started the pod, weren't we? Just sort of like how they go, and you settle into night. You settle into
what it used to be like.
Yeah, you settle into a nice groove, and everything's okay, and you can just have a cup of cocoa and have a hug and go to bed. It's fine. Or that's what I imagine was going to happen after the pod tonight. Anyway, speaking of nice grooves, we are into a groovy with our Freeplay Fortnightly that never happens fortnightly, but I have used AI images for the first time ever to create our Instagram account, which you will never see because you're not on social media, this week to advertise certainly my half of the Freeplay Fortnight.
Lovely.
And because obviously I don't know what yours is, I can never advertise it.
Fine.
So I just kind of have to advertise mine. But yeah, it's a weird world, the AI imagery. Like I was freaked out when it started doing, when I put some words in and it came up with exactly what I wanted. But then also,
it's not bad going.
Yeah, well, on the flip side of that, it really struggled to spell free play, like as in even like as one word or separate words, and also Fortnite. Like at one point, it went free play Fortnite. Like it was like that was like the letters that were in the word that I wrote in there.
That's not bad.
It was quite accurate.
That is how I would normally say it.
Is that how you've always been saying it in your head this whole time? But that's what we should probably call it now.
You sure?
No, not all. Our free play fortnightly. If you don't know what this triple A standard of podcast is, we both take a game and we keep it secret from each other, and then we review said game, and then the other person gives it an arbitrary score out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we get onto that, on the way over, or just before I came over, I noticed that a couple of things that I was quite excited about this week was that there is a Wipeout book, like a coffee book coming out. Wipeout Futurism, I think it's called. And I only literally saw it like 5 minutes before the pod, and I texted you and I was like, it looks so good. Yeah. It looks so nice. And I think it might be the thing I asked for Christmas.
Nice.
You're like, I agree with that.
Yeah, I get that. Wipeout is known for the design stuff. So
I guess I'm asking you, do you think that's a good sort of investment of if you're going to quota your Christmas givings from another, like, so Sally would say to me,
I'm not buying it for you.
No, you don't have to. It's fine. It's okay. But like Sally would say to me, my wife, and say, "Oh, what do you want for Christmas?" And I'd be like, "All right, okay, I don't really know." And I feel like this is the thing that I might.
That seems like a valid thing to.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think I'm excited about it. I'm going to do it. Yeah, I just wanted some sort of like affirmation,
validation of your own tastes and wants.
Yeah, pretty much.
You do you. You can do a lot worse than that.
That's what I use the podcast for, just for you to go. Yeah, no, that's okay. That's not okay. Mostly that one, really. And the second thing was that I thought was really cool, that I'd noticed that Atari 50, obviously they've had the they've had the extended anniversary edition come out recently. I think it was about a month ago. But I noticed on the Nintendo eShop, and I was kind of going, oh, I've got the original version that I still haven't actually unpacked yet. That is, and I don't know what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for like a special moment in my life.
Like Atari 100.
Yeah. Well, this is what's happened. So I've had it for about a year, and I'm thinking about it. Like, I can't wait to play it, but I kind of want like a day off work when I'm like by myself.
Just plow through it.
Yeah. And they days off work usually, like just doing tidying and cleaning up children's shit everywhere, like literal, and things. And I noticed that, and I was like, oh, this anniversary edition's coming out, and I feel like, oh, do I want to just kind of sell the old version that I've got new and get this whole one packed in? But I found that on Nintendo eShop they're actually selling it as DLC.
Yep.
Which is amazing. That's so cool.
Great shout. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so I just feel like Digital Eclipse just do such a good job of caring about the people that that are buying their things. Yeah. And I think it's like £11. So in the end, I'll have ended up paying, like, because I got Atari 50, like the cartridge for like £18. So it's ended up being like the same 30 quid.
Yeah.
So so I think I'll get that too.
Nice.
And then I will eventually get around to that day off work where I play the entire thing. Maybe
it was kind of nice, like, because I picked it up on Friday, so that was my Friday night.
Cool.
Playing the new DLC. Kind of like when I did Thank Goodness You're Here. Just sat and like wrote off a couple of hours and just ploughed through it, and almost treated it more like a film. Definitely did, because
it's a two-parter, isn't there?
There are 2 bits. So the other one I've had for only came out last month or month before. A bit more reading and pictures in that one. This one's a bit more video-y. So actually, for a sort of quiet night instead of watching telly, kind of a deal. Yeah, definitely scratched an itch. So.
Which one did you prefer in terms of, if you did have a preference of? What is it? The Wider World of Atari.
Wider World of Atari and the First Console War is the other one. The First Console War one was interesting, but because it was talking so much about in television and stuff like that, you kind of assumed that maybe some actual Intellivision stuff would make an appearance, and it's Atari ports of Intellivision stuff.
Oh, right, okay.
So it kind of does. Yeah. Like, with good reason. Like, it is explained why that is the case. So, like, I think weirdly, I think the story of the second one, the Console War one, was more engaging.
Okay.
But I kind of preferred some of the singular bits that it covered in the first one. So, like, the design of some of the box art and the logo and stuff like that, I thought was really, really interesting. Yeah. They both have their merits.
Oh, that's exciting. So, something for me to look forward to. So, Freeplay Fortnite. Should we Rochambeau, as the old adage goes? The old rock, paper, scissors. Right, okay. That's actually brought something back that we'll talk about another time, which is the rock, paper, shotgun article that you sent. I just wanted to give it a shout out because it was really good. It's at the PC Gaming 100 games you should play now on 2024
I
PC
can't
games.
remember.
Yeah, and you sent me that before, and that was really interesting because the list of those games, the first 50. So it's the 11th of November today, and it said it was going to be released the second 50 tomorrow. So if you look up rock, paper, shotgun PC games, I'm sure that'll come up as a hit, and that's like the top 100 games you should play on the PC at the moment. And I found the list really interesting, so it might be something we can talk about in the future. Yeah, cool. Rock, paper, scissors this time.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
1, 2, 3, go. Scissors, double scissors.
Oh, no.
1, 2, 3, go. Rocks!
Jesus, that.
1, 2, 3, go. Hey, okay. Paper covers
paper
rock.
had to do the complete set.
To be honest, I kind of lay down a little bit there. I was like, I'm done.
Gave up.
Exactly. Yeah. Paper me.
Yep. Sure.
Yep.
I would like to talk to you today about Trepang².
Yes, you would.
Yes, I would. I played it on the PC.
I have heard of this, but that's about it. Like, I know very little of.
So, it's a first-person shooter.
Okay.
And it kind of harkens back to Fear and those sort of PC shooter horror hybrid games with the slow motion havoc, basically. So you are some kind of super army soldier who can turn invisible, can slow down time, and has access to a vast array of guns.
Cool.
You are pointed in a general direction of things to go and kill. You go forth and you kill them.
So what made you pick this game then? Have you been meaning to play it for a while, or is it?
I played it a while back, but yes, it was on my list of things that I wanted to dip my toes into. I am not a huge fan of horror games.
Okay.
I am a wuss. So anything that kind of takes the edge off a little, I'm kind of more like, okay, yeah, I could go for something like that. And I like first person shooters. Like, if I'm in the mood, they scratch an itch. And I'd seen this one doing the rounds for a while, and thought, you know what, like, I'm up for that. And found it cheap on Steam, and in I waded, and it's all right.
It's fine.
I'm looking at my notes, and I'm just like,
you thinking that are we even going to bother reading any of these out?
Well, so like, it's.
When's it from?
Where do I start with it?
When's it from?
It's reasonably recent.
Okay.
Like it's not retro by any stretch of the imagination. You can get a PS5 version. I don't think you can get a PS4 version.
Okay.
It's that sort of thing. So it looks the part, right? It does look good. I think the big thing for me is the sound effects. Holy hell, the sound effects are just so good. Like, everything is just so crunchy and visceral, and like it's cathartic in the extreme.
Nice.
And when you are like in the moment to moment, like in a firefight that's engaging and all that kind of stuff, it really grabs you. There's some light stealth mechanics, so you can kind of, level the playing field a little bit, but I kind of preferred to just stick it in easy mode and just plow through everything and go for like full on power fantasy kind of territory. And it kind of caters to sort of both approaches quite happily. It has a mission set in Goole in Yorkshire.
What?
It's got a side mission supposedly set in an abandoned coal mine somewhere in Goole in East Yorkshire.
Feels like Resistance. I remember Resistance Fallen Man was always like, because it was like a UK based game with it. So it was always a bit weird, but it was like, just in Manchester Cathedral. And I'm like,
all the exotic hotspots.
It's like, really? I was like, are we? Okay.
My note here is Goole doesn't just happen. Which I stand by.
I prefer it if you don't explain that.
Google it.
Oh, there we go.
That was laboured.
Podcast end.
We've peaked people. It's good. You have some missions that are kind of like a survival type thing. You can unlock like wave based bits and bobs, and other ones are a bit more story driven. And you start at A, you go to B, and in some cases go back to A. And that's all fine and good. It is not a AAA game.
Okay.
Right? And it shows. So clearly, they started with a good idea and then kind of ran out of things to hang off it. So like you have a safe house where you could go and select your missions and test out loadouts and tinker with your character design and all that kind of stuff. And it's meant to be for this sort of shadowy organisation, and there's no people in it.
Oh, right, okay.
And they just talk to you on the radio. But there's like one. Actually, no. There's like two people. There's the pilot for the helicopter who stays in the helicopter, and a quartermaster that just stays near the front door, behind bulletproof glass.
What a great job, quartermaster.
Not in this. Not in
Trepang.
The problem is that the first time you see it, if you've ever played a first-person shooter since about 2015, you see it and you're like, oh yeah, we'll be coming back here for a mission later. It just looks like that kind of place. And I was right. And so, the campaign itself is about 5 hours or so long. You can get some DLC that adds on some extra missions, and there's side content. So like there's stuff to sink your teeth into. Which brings me nicely to the kind of horror side of things. And you occasionally have these like gooey zombie monster type things, and occasional like bigger, angrier monster to deal with. And it's the story tries to explain it. However, I don't know if it's like a kind of a language barrier thing, if it was originally written in something that wasn't English and got translated and by somebody who perhaps missed a couple of a bit of nuanced detail or something like that, or if it was just the way it was explained. I felt the storyline bringing everything together was bare bones at best.
Okay.
Granted, for the nature of the game, you kind of don't need it, but at the same time, for some of what it seemed to be trying to do, it felt more invested in the story than I did. And then what kind of compounded this for me was when I got some of the DLC, one of the Steam reviews said something along the lines of, this is great. It's really like brought the story together for me and finished it off. And yeah, great. You've nailed it. Well done. And I read that. And then I played it, and then I read it again. I was like, am I missing something here? Like, if I missed like an audio log that just adds a bit more...
Tells me what's going on.
Well, I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
The only problem was that, like, there was no depth to that.
Okay.
There wasn't, like... I wasn't getting a sense of any kind of motivation from anybody, or, like, it either felt like it was not nearly clever enough, or it was trying to be too clever, but it never really felt like it found a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And there were times when I thought the story was going to go a certain way, and I still kind of think it did. Mm-hmm. Just it didn't quite explain it. It's like when you're watching a film or a TV show, and it alludes to things, and then you start filling the gaps.
Yeah.
And then you'll always have that moment of like, was that deliberate? Mm-hmm. And then some of the really good shows, it'll be deliberate, and it was all part of the plan. Whereas the other ones, you're like, actually, no, I am just making up for the lazy ass writing now. And I kind of always felt like I was making up for lazy writing. I feel like
I don't know why this is sorry, just completely cutting to your review, but it feels like you're explaining like the first series of Homeland. Did you watch Homeland with Damien
Lewis? I didn't,
Lewis?
but I've heard bits and bobs, and I think you're probably.
And that felt
close.
very much like that sort of like. It feels like this game would sit in that world almost.
Yeah, and it would almost be more satisfying if I felt like it committed to a lane, and like all of the writing was so bad and so schlocky that I was just like, I am definitely doing the heavy lifting here. Or it was so like tight, but at the same time kind of nebulous and all that kind of stuff. That like it felt like it sort of fell between stalls and just didn't quite stick any kind of landing anywhere. He said, mixing metaphors horribly. But and even some of the dialogue, you hear it, and it's one of those things where you're like, I understand what you're getting at, but that was not a sentence. And like it's just bits and pieces like that where like it feels really harsh to like come down on what I assume is a reasonably small development team from, I assume, not necessarily an English-speaking country, and all that kind of stuff, to pick holes in these things. But it's very indicative to me of that kind of, there is so much there to like, but it is lacking a polish, right? It's lacking that extra little bit that had a AAA studio done the same thing, you would be able to expect. So that said, if you go in knowing that it is a little bit of a rough diamond, there are definitely bits you can enjoy in it. Like, and it is, for me, it was the sound effects, the moment to moment of the combat. I vastly more enjoyed the bits where you're against like more human opponents rather than any of the monsters or anything like that. I really felt those bits fell a bit flat for me personally. I could see if you were into your kind of spooky wooky kind of stuff, I'm sure there are bits you could enjoy there.
Was that just a bit, did it feel like a bit of an excuse to have something that was just like, this isn't a pure FPS, it's got something different to it? Or
I think it could have fallen into one of two categories. Again, it's that kind of weird little like duality to it that I can't quite put my finger on, where I think if they had stripped all that out, people would have gone, oh well, it's just Call of Duty with a slow-mo button, which it's not really. It feels more retro than that. Like you can't aim down sights, for example, and you can dual wield shotguns and stuff like that.
I'm interested now.
Yeah, right? You can slide along the ground and just like go into slow motion and plow through people and all that kind of stuff. And believe me, when it's firing on all cylinders, it's great. But at the same time, if you do have the monstery stuff, you've got that other hand where it's like, well, actually, it's kind of more like an homage to Fear and the sort of the days when we were dabbling with what a first-person shooter could look like and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it kind of feels on a lot of these fronts like it sits in an odd middle ground where it hasn't quite fully committed to what it's doing, but nonetheless, like, you have that core. And so I think it feels most to me like they started with that core gameplay loop, which you should, when you're putting these things together, and they really, really got that tight. They really, really tuned that, and then they were like, "Fuck, we need a story," and like, "Oh, we need a way of getting more bad guys in," and so like you're fighting like shadowy mercenaries 1 minute, and then like cultists for some reason, and you're like, why are these people here? And then that's on top of the horror stuff, and it's just like it's those sort of elements where it feels like it's, if you've got something in early access, and things just get hanged on it, and all that kind of stuff, it sort of feels like that, and it's become this sort of weird nebulous kind of blob of a game that is simultaneously quite short but feels oddly bloated.
Okay.
And so again, it's that like two sides of the same thing, and it's kind of not quite here or there.
I feel like, again, I use weird analogies in my head. I feel like this is a hot donut that you put into sugar.
Yeah.
And then you can only get a certain amount of sugar on it before
it becomes sickly and weird.
It just becomes weird and coagulates on the outside.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite close to where I'm thinking. Like, I would almost have preferred to play it for like 3 or 4 hours and gone like, that was a really fun 3 or 4 hours, rather than
gameplay was fine.
Yeah, rather than like 5 to 7, and I'm like, why have I just shot a load of weird cultists in the face in Ghoul?
Yeah.
It
could happen.
Yeah, it could. But
it's too real.
It's one of those. It's a bit of an odd duck. I do not regret my time with it. I have not gone back to it since, and it isn't like I spent like dozens upon dozens of hours playing it. Yeah. In all honesty, and I've not really felt the need to. In fact, here, a note at the end here. It feels like it's got a point to make, but it could be made better. There's a lot of stuff in it for how, like, despite how good that core combat is.
Yeah.
Some of the extra bits around it just don't quite land, and that is slightly disappointing because I wanted it to. Like, I was ready for it to. I was waiting for that little story snippet to just bring it all together nicely and go like, well, this is what's going on.
This is the clever bit now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was waiting for it to just have that little, almost like a punchline moment. Yeah, for it to be clever, and it just never really arrived for me, or it was there and I missed it.
Yeah,
and I don't know. And again, it's that kind of like, it's yin and yang, like that, but it never really feels like it finds that kind of balance in the middle, So noble experiment for sure, and I would imagine that the studio are going to go on and probably do something really cool next time. But at the moment, it feels sort of like not quite a proof of concept. It's definitely its own thing, and it definitely stands on its own, and it's definitely worth checking out. But it's a kind of big, dumb Saturday night kind of a game, rather than I'm going to sit there and plough dozens of hours into it.
Rather than a professional Thursday.
Sure, yeah, why not? Yeah.
What happened to Trepang²? What's Trepang²?
I think Trepang was the studio. So I don't know where Trepang was. Please consult your local internet. But the way the title is stylized, I have put first note I've got out of the gate here: Trepang²?
Yeah.
Question mark. So it might not even be Trepang², really. So yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I should have researched it. Frankly, I haven't.
Don't care.
It's fine. You're not here for the extra bits.
So I feel like I'm in the same ballpark here as Jedi Survivor in terms of scoring. Now, what I mean by that is that I think that possibly, well, not even possibly, I think that it sounds like Jedi Survivor was a better made game by a big studio, but I feel like you're feeling the same way about the subject in so much that you sort of like, there's bits, but I don't know.
Can I steer your thinking on that point then?
Well, you can,
without giving you a score. I've definitely got.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I've definitely got a number for this one in my head.
Okay,
right. For me, the difference between this and Jedi Survivor, and you're right. There's a lot of similarities in how I'm kind of seeing it and what I'm thinking. However, Trepang definitely definitely has the better moment-to-moment combat and gameplay.
Okay.
Definitely. By a country mile.
Yeah.
I would much rather be playing Trepang than that Star Wars game that I've already forgotten the name of. But yeah, like, you're right. There's a lot of the things hanging around that fall into kind of a similar kind of a boat.
Okay.
But yeah, that at heart, at the very core of it, Trepang's definitely the better put together beast.
I initially, after sort of a couple of minutes, was thinking like a 6. Now, that feels like it's maybe a positive spin on things, but it feels like there's like, I don't know. Let's be sensible. Let's say 5. Let's say 5 out of 10. I think
you're going 5.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a 5. I feel like it sounds like a average game that has got some good things going for it and some things that detract from it as well. So it feels like it kind of comes out in the middle in the end. It's that donut that has some sugar in it, not enough, but you don't want too much either. So now that I've revealed that number, what did you have in your head?
I was going to give it 7.
What? Oh shit! Right. Okay.
Yeah. I know. I was going to give it 7.
I feel really bad about it now.
No, like it
shit,
is.
Should have went with 6.
Like that moment to moment stuff and that core gameplay and those sound effects.
Oh, I was really off. I'm sorry.
No. It's because I laboured that kind of point about what you would call the trappings around it, the trepangs around it.
Yeah, nice. There we go. Landed it.
Hey, flawless.
Bump that review up. Get it up.
But yeah, no, it is genuinely the gameplay when it's coalesced and it's in that sweet spot is really good.
Oh, right, okay.
It is really, really good.
Yeah,
and I think it is good enough to more than make up for the kind of if you're playing a game that's a bit rough around the edges, you would say it was quite janky, right?
Yes.
It's kind of buggy. It's not quite there. It is not a janky game. However, the narrative is janky as fuck.
Okay.
Right? So, like, the gameplay itself is rock solid, really good fun when it works. So if you can just go in and, like, basically ignore the dialogue, the downtime, the fact that it's trying to put a story together and all that kind of stuff, I think you can have a really, really good time with it. If you're going in expecting something that's going to tell a tight story, you ain't going to find it here. But like I have, if you plow through it and you get to the stage that you have like the survival and the wave-based missions open to you, and you can just go back in, dip into it for an hour or so, I think there's a good time to be had. So it definitely has a place.
Yeah, there's so much risk in this arbitrary scoring of each other's reviews. I feel like I've really let you down. I mean,
no, you haven't let me down. You've let down a small team of indie developers. Is what you've done.
Trepang don't care what I say. Trepang have more like clout than me in the business, in the biz.
So I mean, I'm definitely, seeing as we're doing this, and I should have prepared and I didn't. I'm going to Google.
You Google while I I'm just thinking out loud about. I genuinely, I've been thinking about this, and I think I've probably mentioned it in the podcast before, but I think that when we come around to retro ranking our games at the end of the year, that actually we might have a couple of sort of maybe, I don't know, extra spots where we go, right, well, you're allowed to move this, for example. Yeah, because I feel like Trepang might have to move up. It's staying in 5 out of 10 for now. We're going to stay true to our thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe if you felt really strongly about Trepang 2, Trepang², Trepinning.
So, to shed some further light on things and in thicken the plot, I think this is going to put an interesting spin on a lot of what I've just said. I truth be told, I deliberately didn't look this up, right? Because my money was on perhaps they were a team in like Sweden or Korea or somewhere. Trepang came out in June 2023.
Okay.
Published,
really recently.
Published by Team 17 of Wakefield fame. So well done there. Trepang Studios, the developers, are based in Vancouver.
Oh, right, okay.
So you would have thought that their English would be good enough to put a story together. So I think in that respect, like that arguably could knock a point or two off the score for the story and the narrative and how that hangs together. It is definitely a double A game at best.
Okay.
And
don't feel so bad now.
Nah, it's endearingly indie. At heart, I think. So yeah, like it's nonetheless, I would encourage anybody that appreciates, first person shooters and, even remembers Fear and stuff like that to, have a look. Because I know it doesn't sound like it, and Fazz's score definitely doesn't reflect it, but I did enjoy it. I did.
Yeah. Well, I guess that we always say as well. Like I say that you can have as much fun as you want with a game. That is in an hour ridiculous arbitrary scoring system that I implement on this thing. Like it doesn't like. I don't know. Like I think that I stand by what I was saying in terms of. I wish I'd given it 6, but I think that it does sound like an average game that has positive parts to it and a little bit of negative parts to it, and it just everyone has a different scoring system. So, so do you want more first-person shooters?
Oh, go on then.
Do you want more first-person shooters with horror aspects?
Go on then.
Do you want a game that's considerably more AAA than Trepang sounds?
Yeah, go on then.
Do you want Bioshock remastered?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Do you want Bioshock remastered from the point of view of somebody that knows absolutely nothing about Bioshock? Like when I say that, like as a gamer and having a gaming podcast, one of the most popular and famous gaming franchises in the world, and I knew so little going into playing through Bioshock for the very first time as well. And the reason I'm selling that hard is because I feel like it probably colours my review, and also this, I'm hoping it kind of sells the podcast a bit in terms of thinking it's just a bit weird that I have never ever really thought about Bioshock, and that's probably wrong. I thought about it, but I didn't know anything about it at all, and I never really kind of went to look into it either.
Never sought it out.
No. So I'm going to take a big old assumption on that you've played the entire.
Oh fuck yeah! Like yeah. And I think this is going to be interesting, especially considering what I was saying about plot. in Trepang.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to start off with things that I was a bit, a little bit shocked by in terms of the game itself. So. I probably don't need to give too much of a background on this. It was in one of our 100 games to play in the GQ magazine, the draft that we did for our
back when
for our first birthday, and I said at the time I was going to try and knock a couple of the games off the list, and I kind of have this year. I'm not trying to use the podcast as a vehicle to do that, but it's difficult when you see them hanging out there and you go, oh, the Bioshock Remastered trilogy is £8, and you're like, well, I kind of have to get that, and because I don't own any of them, and then it's like, because that's just too much of a good deal, and then you're like, and then eventually you kind of go, I kind of have to play it. It almost becomes a mandatory sort of thing, because
it's the rules.
The thing that I know about it is that it's regularly probably in people's top, maybe like 25 to 50 games, maybe it would feel like, maybe even higher for some people as well. So it would be silly of me to just, pass it by and go, I'm all right. I've never really known much about it.
Come this far without playing it.
Exactly, I know. It was out in 2007. And it's really weird. So it was developed by 2K, and it's really odd that I feel like I've played quite a few 2K games, like sort of this year for the podcast, like The Quarry, and then Borderlands as well. That is in, which is really funny that I played Borderlands before this.
You reckon?
And because Borderlands 2009, and for me, not that timing wise, but certainly from a point of view of where I feel Bioshock sits compared to Borderlands, I feel like it's, even though it is a first-person shooter RPG sort of world, Bioshock felt more polished than Borderlands does, and Borderlands is 2 years on and has 2 years knowledge of knowing how good Bioshock is. It almost feels like it just is. I mean, I think I gave Borderlands 5 out of 10, and I feel quite comfortable with how that landed in my scores. And it's probably not going to give anything away that, you'd think that Bioshock, would be better scored in our podcast, you'd think, but, we'll see. See how much of a good job I do of reviewing it. I definitely remember that this was like a period of time that it felt like when this came out in 2007, it felt like this is when Xbox 360 really had a stranglehold. Like, isn't it? It felt like being a PS3 owner that I was, that it kind of, this felt like the time that when Gears of War and you had this coming out and stuff, and you kind of looked over at someone's 360, your friend's 360, and thought, you're better than me, aren't you?
Oh, you chose right.
It was like, yeah, no. And you had the Halo kicking around and stuff, you're like, oh, I'll just go back to playing my Resistance of Man. Like, I really loved, but, you know, like, as in, come on now. So, yeah, it really did feel like that big hitter stage. And, you know, the minimal amount of things that I knew about this game. So, what did I know before I started playing Bioshock about a month and a half ago? I knew that it was in sort of some sort of dystopian undersea world. That is literally pretty much like, and that it was a first-person shooter. So, you can imagine that I was quite shocked when I found out that...
Bioshocked.
Yeah, Bioshocked indeed. Well, number one, I was like, oh, this is why they call it Bioshock. Like, I genuinely... Because I was like, within like the first 10 minutes, like, you know, you are given this genetic variation where you can use plasmids, and which is a little bit like Trepang, I guess, in a way, that almost you kind of have that, you know, get given abilities. I didn't expect there to be so much... RPG in it as well, and this is kind of where I bring back a Borderlands similarity, where I think I remember with Borderlands as well, where it's like it feels like it's trying to straddle that first person shooter, but without being able to aim down. I cannot speak now. Aim down sights, but also trying to eat its cake with the RPG world as well. That is, I was shocked at how much there was of an RPG twist on things. Like in terms of the almost the looting. You know, there's so much loot you can pick up, and I think that one of the things that this does better than Borderlands is that it seems to keep everything not to a Resident Evil level of premium in terms of limited things that you can pick up, but it really stretches you to make sure you pick up every single little thing. Everything you loot matters to you. Yeah. Whereas in Borderlands, it was like, oh, here's $3, and it was like, and you end up with like $1,000, and it was like, it just didn't seem to matter. Whereas here, it's like, oh, here's $3. Like, fuck, I need that $3. Yeah. I need to heal soon. Like, you know, I need to go to, like, you know, my garden or whatever it's. What's it called? The garden thing, my Bob with the lovely clown face. That one. Yeah. Anyway, the circus of values. And that's that. I really need to get there with my $17 and heal. You know. So it did feel like it did a great job of that looting system where you needed to go in every single box and you needed to cover every single centimetre of every single room because it all mattered to you. What else was a bit of an sort of, you know, an eye-opener to me immediately was that how much of a horror aspect to this game there was. And when you were speaking before and you were sort of saying, I'm doing an FPS and it's a horror and I'm a bit of a wuss, and I was like, oh, me too. Like, I was like, this is what I'm doing as well. And I was like, he's not doing Bioshock, is he? And I was like, yeah, I just thought, it's really scary. Like, it's quite. It's so threatening. Like,
it's got a really oppressive atmosphere.
Yeah. The setup is all of my worst fears. Crashing in an airplane in the middle of the ocean. Oh, right, okay. Oh, I'm saved. It's okay. There's a tower. Oh, wait, you've got to go 20,000 leagues under the sea in a bathysphere. Are you fucking having my life? That's like my worst nightmare. Like, is it if that happened to me and it was just like, oh, you've got to go down. I'm like, nope. Not doing it. Not doing it. Just going
to sit on the steps of the lighthouse, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to go lie in that pool of oily water outside and just accept my fate. Because it's just like, and it just gets you in there straight away. And it really is like an attack on the senses. And it does that great job that you talk about with Trepang as well, where the sound effects in this game that just... I do have a little bit of a gripe with it because I think sometimes that when you round a corner and you know it kind of makes you aware that there is an enemy, a splicer within the area, because they start chatting and mumbling and jumbling and that's great that they've kind of got this weird freaky thing going on where you're like, right, okay, I know that I'm in danger right now. But also I felt like it didn't do a great job of that, because it felt like they were almost speaking over a tannoy to you. Like, it was like, oh, that splicer is like 3 rooms away, but it's almost like they're behind me. And I'm like, it felt like they were trying to freak you out a little bit too much with that.
Yeah, I get that.
And I don't know if that's to do with the remastered. I've heard some things about the remastered version compared to the original version. Sorry, I played the remastered version, where I heard that the sound effects can be a little bit, to do with the compression, it can be a bit weird. I don't know, but certainly from a point of view for me, that was one thing I was like, oh, that's not quite as good as I thought it was going to be. It wasn't quite the... it felt like they just didn't do a very good job with that part of it. But in general, the way that they make you feel when you enter a room, and I think most people probably remember the moment where early on, where you're in the medical pavilion, I think it is, and you go into a certain room and there's a splicer shadow on the wall, and you're around the corner and they're not there anymore, and you're like, you bastards. Again, my worst nightmares. I already know there's these weird sort of splicery people wandering around, and there's clearly one in this room, and now they're not there anymore. I don't know where they are. And they're coming out of you. They're coming out at you, like, from the walls and stuff. You're like, oh, that's so good. Like, I hate you. I love you. I hate you. Just I really loved not knowing about almost the fact that I've kind of got this far in my life and not known about it. Like, as in, I feel like it would have really kind of dulled the experience for me, and I've just done that on a podcast for some people somewhere, possibly.
I mean, I'm sitting here right now, and I'm quietly envious of the fact that you've got to experience it for the first time. And
I didn't want to imbue that in you, but I kind of wanted certainly people that know the franchise so well to feel my... I don't want to say it was like super uber endless joy or anything with this game. I'm a little bit probably down on this game compared to what most people probably would be, I think. I think from what I can see, I think a lot of people consider this to be a masterpiece, and I consider it to be a really, 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 really good game. It kind of stops a little bit, and like I say, one of those things was just like, I kind of felt like there's a few bits that weren't absolutely perfect. And I want to get the bad bits out of the way first. Like, controls are a little bit fiddly on a console. It felt... I don't know how to describe... I do know how to describe this. It felt like a PC game. It felt like I should be playing with a mouse and keyboard. And when you're trying to juggle between your plasmids and your weapons, and Big Daddy is trying to make you his little bitch, like, it's in that... I found that there wasn't a level of difficulty necessarily. It was just fiddly. It was just, I was like, I'm one minute I'm casting out some electric out my left hand, and then I'm like trying to like get a... I guess like an armor piercing bullet, so I have to change to that out my gun, and you kind of almost went into a bit of a pause screen while you're doing that, and it felt like it could have just done a better job of that. I don't know how you do that though, because there's so much variety in the weaponry that you have as a person, whether that is your plasmids or a gun or a wrench or whatever. Like, I get that it's really hard to put all that onto an interface and make that work during a fluid first person shooter. I think they did a really good job as best they could, but certainly I did feel that was a bit of a problem for me as well.
They do a better job of it in the sequels.
Okay, that's interesting to know. I mean, it's good to know as well.
Yeah, when I played through it, it was a bit of a... I did have that moment of like, oh god, why didn't they standardise the controls? When I moved on to the sequels, and then I played it for about 10 minutes, and was like, oh no, this is better.
Yeah.
And then I kind of came out the other end and was like, well, why didn't they standardise it the other way?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do wonder if they were re-releasing them now, if that is something that they would consider doing, because yes, it is a bit fiddly, and yes, it is a bit clunky, but yeah, over time they do manage to crack it eventually.
Okay. And I do like to be upfront about saying that I play a remaster, just because obviously there could be some differences between the Xbox 360 version, but when I read up about it, it didn't seem like there was a massive amount of difference actually made to the gameplay with Bioshock. It almost felt like they just polished it, made it look great and sound great, or apparently that was like that's what was meant to happen, and yeah, but generally it sounds like the core gameplay remains very much the same as what it was in 2007, which is a great comment for the 2007 original, because if they've done very little to it and everybody thinks it's an absolute masterpiece, then brilliant. I was super impressed by the skill, almost the skill tree, if you will, the plasmids and how you go through and you pick up your plasmid slots, and going back to that point of just giving you the exact right amount of things to get by with at that moment. I never really felt like I was struggling with this game, but there was certainly a couple of times where I was going back to Vita chambers after being killed by a Big Daddy or something, where, you know, it didn't happen very often at all, to be honest. And I was a bit like, is this game... I was like, I don't think this game's difficult necessarily, but they just do a good job of sort of limiting and rationing what you have available to you at that point, just to give you just enough to get by. But also, it feels like one more minute or one more bullet and you're done for. And I love living on the edge in a video game where you feel like I feel incredible with all these sort of powers and all this weaponry and stuff, but also I'm, at any minute, something could come at me, and it generally, I know I've referenced the Big Daddy a couple of times, in terms of like when they're charging at you and you're like trying to flip between all the bullets you have left just to take it down. Yeah, what a great feeling! What a wonderful feeling that is. You're like, oh, that was awesome. I'm terrified. Brilliant. So yeah, it just does a really good job of not holding your hand, like, and you kind of have bosses, but not really as well. That is in, I know you do have them, but when you get to sort of Fontaine's Lair and you get the Sander Cohen and stuff, but you're still using everything you've just used during the game. Like, you're still using the exact same mechanics. Really, you don't use too many different ways. It's not like you suddenly have to come up with a different way of killing a boss. It's almost like you just use what you've got. Yeah,
I don't remember them being particularly like gimmicky or anything like that.
So maybe they're not. Maybe therefore they wouldn't be that memorable. They're not going to be like the Psycho Mantises and things like that. But at the same time, like, it's just you just have to do what you've done the whole time. And if you get good at the game, then actually it becomes, well, you can beat this boss in a certain way. So yeah, I appreciated that. It felt like the gameplay was at a really just constant, good, high level, and it never really sagged at any point.
Doesn't feel like it was trying to pull the rug out from underneath you or anything.
Exactly,
like that.
And that's it's just respectful of the player. That's what it felt like. This game was respectful of the player the entire way through, and it just builds up the. I don't want to say a level of difficulty, but almost just it seems to build every block of the way that you become a better sort of, I guess your protagonist becomes better at what they do, and you become a better player as well. It just seems to do it at the right time. It almost adds an extra plasmid at the right time, or you find, and that can be random. Like, you could miss several plasmids or abilities that you might never see because you miss them in a corner of a room or whatever. But it still manages to do that. Like, do you know what I mean? It's almost you could blast through this game and miss loads of stuff, but I still think you'd probably find the right things at the right time to help you progress through the story. And the story, it just, what do you say about the story? Like, I don't want to come on to this at the end as well. I said to you that my game, like, mute protagonists, that is a thing for me, that I feel like that I really enjoy somebody that just doesn't speak, and then you kind of get the audio logs, and just the characters around you just get so much better building blocks because you're not interjecting all the time, and also you can portray yourself into that role so much better. Or this is how I feel about it, and you're not somebody else. So therefore, even though we have a character called Jack, actually it's you, and you're experiencing this, and therefore the emotion that evokes in you, it just does I feel personally, for me anyway, that it feels like it's more personal to me as a story. And so they do such a really great job of building that up. And I'm going to be honest, like, it's a weird, and obviously I won't give it away for anybody, but there's a I guess what everyone calls like a big twist in this. And I knew the one of the things that I knew about the game very minimally was that it's this dystopian future, and there's like a big twist in it. And to be honest, I kind of because there's a twist, you kind of telegraph what that might be in the end, and you kind of start to see it, and you're like, all right, I've telegraphed that sort of a little bit. So did it lack impact? Not particularly, but certainly you kind of just waiting for it to happen at some point. But even then, they just maintain just this perfect sort of building up of tension and great character building, and I took about a week's break away from this game, and I'm going to be honest. For a while, I think that I was probably a little bit lower on the game that I thought it was going to be, and I wasn't. I didn't think it super had its hooks in me, and I took a break, played another game, and then came back to it, and I was like, "Oh shit, no, this is really good." Like, you know, and I think it just helped to have a little break from it, just sort of like. I think I played like probably about 70% of the game, and I was like. And I almost got to the point where I was like, am I done? Am I done with the game? Like, do I need to finish it? And I was like, no, I've got to go back and sort of at least sort of give it its due, considering most people consider it to be absolutely amazing. And immediately I was like, no, I remember now. I remember how good this is. So, yeah, it really speaks for the game to be able to say that it got its hooks into me, like, is in later on. Like, you know, I had a break and I was like, no, this is excellent, actually. But yeah, so, like I say, kind of, I guess, really rounding it off. You know, I really love the little details in this, like the pipe mania sort of mini game that you're going back in. God, that's the most frustrating part of the game. Like, just like, how many times did I have like a fucking camera blow up on my face or something, a gun blow up on my face? I was like, I hate you. But just to have that little mechanic in there as well, they thought of everything in this game. Like, you know, they just thought of. Every nook and cranny has something in it, and they just filled the world so brilliantly. You know, and like I said, they just great pace. The enemy AI was quite good, really. You know, it just elicited real emotion in me, like whether I was sort of scared, whether I was excited, whether I felt joy, anger, as you just heard. Like, all the time, I was feeling something the entire way during this game, which is more than can be said for. You know, a lot of games, and that's probably what I really enjoyed about the experience the most, was that it was just like, you know, well done, you've just dragged some emotions out of me. You know, like,
you made me feel something.
Yeah, well done. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and apart from the couple of sort of small bits I had, like I say, you know, in a couple of fiddly controls and a little bit of a weird sound sort of thing going on. Yeah, I can see why everyone's like, this is one of the greatest games ever made, because I'm like. As we always say, you know, there's probably no such thing as the perfect game. But and even if you drop a couple of things here and there, it just does so many things so well and so right over an extended period. And again, I always sort of say in game length, you know, this feels like the perfect game length as well. Like, it just feels like it has an extended story, but set within the right time frame for me to feel like I've just got a full experience out of it without overstaying its welcome. Would you like to say anything about how you feel about it, or
how do I feel about Bioshock? So I really enjoyed my time with it, and part of that was you remember when we were talking about Borderlands, and I said about playing it through with my wife back in our early courting days and all that kind of stuff. The Bioshock trilogy was like the first set of games we played through together on the couch, you know, like actually in the same room at the same time kind of thing. And Borderlands we'd kind of dabbled with, but Bioshock was the first time where, you know, we'd both heard of it and we're like, oh yeah, I've heard it's really, really good. Like, let's go through it. And yeah, I have really, really fond memories of that entire trilogy. It definitely, I can't remember if it's the second or the third game, has one of my favourite jump scares of all time. I only have two. But yeah, this is one of them. And it's just so masterfully done that... Because I'm not great with jump scares anyway, right? I feel like I'm quite often ready for what I think is going to be a jump scare, and I just tense up, and then that's fine, and it comes and goes, and that's it. This one,
nope, fuck off.
yeah. Basically, I go into defensive mode. I basically emotionally curl up, and that's it. You can't get me because I'm fucking ready for you. This one came out of nowhere.
Did you punch the TV? Like, any reaction?
No. Like this was like. This was one of those ones, and I don't want to spoiler it for people because I'm hoping that off the back of what you've just said, a couple more people might go and play this trilogy, because I think they should.
It's £8. £8 at the moment.
It's routinely on sale as well.
I know. It's just like it's great that it's just out there for people to be able to access for that kind of money.
Yeah, and the reason I don't want to spoil this particular jump scare, but I do want to talk about it, is because it's one of those ones where, occasionally, like, games will try and be a film, or it'll try and, be literary and stuff like that. This jump scare came about because it's a video game. Like, it used the medium to get me. And it used all the trappings of how you play a first-person shooter to totally get me. That is fucking clever, and I really appreciated that. And there was one other game that I want to review at some point, so I'm not going to talk about it in any detail now, but it also did it in a very similar way. And I'm like, whenever it happens, I'm like, you know what? Fair play. Yeah. Like, that is clever. So, yeah, like, I have fond memories of various bits of the entire trilogy. And, yeah, that first game, like, going down to Rapture the first time is, like, seared upon my soul. And just that entire sequence. And I know plenty of people would point at, like, the train ride at the start of Half-Life and stuff like that and go, oh yeah, one of the great intros. But for me, it's Rapture that takes that spot, and seeing it out there for the first time and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like, I have really, really fond memories of it. Hearing you talk about it again has made me want to play it again, which I think is a hallmark of a great game. Yeah, so I think for my part, I was looking at the scores and what we've got in various different places and all that kind of stuff, and I was umming and ahhing about where to put it, but I'm kind of thinking 10.
Okay.
I was very, very close to giving it a 9 just on what you said, until you said about not playing it for a week.
Yeah.
And then it just, like, it's almost like it got its hooks into you without you playing it.
Yeah. I felt like I had to go back to Rapture.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the bit that swayed me to put it so high up, is the fact that the city itself, the setting, is a character. Practically, and it is like, and I know you said about the narrative and the building blocks, and that's the kind of stuff that for me Trepang was completely missing. It doesn't dedicate itself to any of that. It clearly started with a good gameplay idea, and then thought, oh yeah, shit, we need a story. Whereas Bioshock, it feels like it's part and parcel of the design from day dot. Was just this whole thing. And yeah, that atmosphere and how it all hangs together, and those different districts and those characters you run into, like, it just hangs together so well.
And to be genuine about how unexpected this was for me, that is and I hadn't been trying to hold it back or anything. Like, I thought, and I know this does happen in another game, that is I thought I was a big daddy. Like, I thought the main character was going to be a big daddy.
Right.
And then when they then first rock up with your little sister, and the noise they make, like a whale. And I was like, what the fuck is that? It's like, oh my god. I was like, please. I can't handle anymore. Man.
You wait till you play against some of the stuff in the second game.
And that's the thing. It's like, I feel like when, at the moment, certainly for the podcast, like when I'm picking up games that I've never played, I try and play the first one, but and I kind of go, I'm going to go back to the rest of the trilogy in this, and but I definitely will.
You should
with this, where it's kind of like, and in my spare time, like, I will find time to play through this, and it's probably the first time that I think that for a while where I've been like, oh yeah, I kind of just want to go and do like a whole sort of trilogy. And I know there's like sort of the extra bits to the end, isn't the DLCs for Infinite and stuff that Burial at Sea, I think it's called, that I just want to go and find out more about what's going on
in that universe,
which I won't lie, like I've probably let it into a little bit too much, where now I kind of know where it's going a little bit, in terms of like when I've been researching this for the pod, it's like, oh, that this is what, like, not what happens fully, but this is how the second one's set, and this is how the third one's set and stuff. So I probably know a little bit more now, that is than I would have done when I was playing this through. So I don't know if it'll have the same sort of impact, but certainly if it gets the same emotional sort of
that's
reaction from me, then fair enough.
And I think that's the other thing that persuaded me to give it a 10 out of 10, is because, like, it's a creative endeavor. Ultimately, making a game is a creative endeavor. And if the point of a creative endeavor is to make people feel things about stuff, and so if it has been able to do that, and it's been able to do that without you even playing the fucking game, then job done. You know, that is art.
Yeah.
You know, then they have created a piece of art.
And if I go to bed, like, dreaming about wrenching splices coming at me, like, which I did several occasions.
Shock them and then hit them. And it just becomes ingrained.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. I was so, like, the amount of times I was like, oh, I've got a plasminate. I was like, I've got loads of Eve I could use. Like, so I was like, what am I doing? Like, then it's just, like, freaking out with, like, you know, my last pistol bullet and, like, my wrench.
Well, that's what's kind of cool about it, though, because you get to the second and the third games and stuff like that, and they start to, like, the controls start to coalesce a little bit, and it feels more like you're dual wielding, and things start to work more in tandem. Yeah. And, like, for me, the second game is the weakest, but it is still great, you know. And I think if you are talking about it in degrees like that, then you're onto a winner.
Yeah, and I don't want to sort of detract from it. I think I would have felt like it would have been maybe about a 9 for me, just because like I don't think it hit the super highs that I felt for like Hotline Miami and Portal 2 and stuff, where there was just something else where it's like, you know, like that final synapse in your brain just goes ding.
Mine's definitely coloured by nostalgia, like definitely.
Well, you know, retro game podcast, that, you know, it should have some nostalgia tinge in there. Quickly then, just mute protagonist then. So I mentioned there that obviously it's something that I really enjoy because I feel like I can paint my personality onto that person, and it was only because I saw it mentioned when I was researching into the game, and I think I saw a comment the other day where it was like someone was talking about Grand Theft Auto 3, and I was thinking, I think that's why I really enjoy Grand Theft Auto 3 compared to, say, Vice City and San Andreas, that arguably to most people more complete games. But I love that Clyde, you know, he was even given a name like afterwards, Clyde or whatever it's called. Like, you know, like he doesn't speak at all, and all the characters therefore breathe around him when you meet them. And I was starting to think actually that, you know, having a mute protagonist in a game feels like something that I really enjoy immediately. And I don't know if you feel the same way, or that you like to have a character to play, or you like to be that character. Oh, funny. Real clever. Okay. Right, fine. Am I seriously going to finish this podcast off like this? This is awful. Right, okay. Right.
I think...
I will press the end button.
I think they are fucking stupid. Because you either come across as really, really arrogant or really, really dumb. Like, I think, like, if you have a narrative, a piece of narrative fiction, you know, you want your characters to have a bit of drive and a bit of agency and all that kind of stuff. And if they don't say anything, unless they are like actually, you know, the character is mute, like, you know, and called out as such.
So how do you?
And I don't just mean like they're just not saying anything. Yeah. Like actually, like that is an identifying characteristic of them.
Yeah.
Then like fine, but ultimately, you know, like Gordon Freeman, perfect example.
Yeah.
Where like, by dint of not saying anything, he still kind of has a personality, but at the same time, he always, to me, like, for how everybody is talking to him and the fact that he is clearly a intelligent man because he is a doctor and all that kind of stuff, like, it just comes across as, like, really aloof.
Yeah, okay.
You know? And it feels strange to me. It almost feels lazy.
Okay.
And it does nothing for me because I want my characters to have a bit of personality. The exception to that, now that you've mentioned it and now we're on the topic, is the guy from Bioshock.
This is why I wanted to, because not that I knew that was your opinion in the first place, but that's like, because I didn't know that. Like, but then I felt like just because you kind of get all the characters talking around him, but it doesn't need to say anything, if that makes sense.
But it's, for me, he says, trying to dance around the spoiler that you tried to so hard to avoid earlier on. For me, there is enough in the story itself to explain why he would not be talkative.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
And I think if it's explained in the world, and there's a reason for it, that is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
However, so often it's not. Claude. It is Claude, yeah, sorry, thank you. In Grand Theft Auto
doesn't even have a name. Didn't he really have a name?
But again, like, perfect example in GTA 3. Like, everybody else is a named character that talks and has a personality, and yet he doesn't. And that just seems really, really lazy.
I think it's just really hard.
Sure, but
doesn't need to talk to anybody.
But they've gone to that much effort to make all these other characters. Why not that one?
Yeah.
And as for, like, portraying yourself onto a character, I just never bought into that argument. But then I studied film and TV. So, like, you wouldn't have a blank slate character at the centre of any of that.
No.
Because nobody would fucking watch it. It would be awful. Can you imagine? And so, I just never really bought into that argument, because everything else I'd ever consumed when I was watching something, it just simply wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But like I say, the exception to that is a mute protagonist that there is an in-universe reason that, even if it's not directly pointed out as this is why they are not talking, but you could fill in, like we were saying earlier about filling in the gaps. If you can make that jump in logic and go, well, that would probably explain it. Yeah. Even that is good enough for me. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be a concrete excuse, just enough of a hint that I can sit there and go, oh yeah, that would make sense. I'm fine with that, but there are so many times where you have a mute protagonist that it's just never acknowledged or addressed in any way, shape or form, and that to me it feels so wrong.
It's so funny because I'm just I'm so impressionable. I just don't care. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Isn't you could just be silent the whole game? Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. It's cool. I mean, as long as the story is lifted somewhere, that's all that matters to me. As long as somebody's telling a good story somewhere, I'm not bothered about who's actually saying it. But yeah, that's really interesting. That's cool. I'm glad that we have a difference of opinion on that, because I don't really have. I have a strong opinion about it that I like it. I don't know why. That is apart from the couple of things that I've mentioned. Really, for whatever reason, it just seems to sit well with me. And I don't know what that is. There you go. I wish I could explain myself, but I cannot. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, it is an interesting point of discussion though, because like you say, there was definitely a period there where it was the done thing almost, and I do see why, even from a technical point of view, I can see why it would be the case, because you're instantly putting a lot more audio in there, and you have to write it and all that kind of stuff, and some one player's motivations might not line up with the characters and all that. But I think if you're writing it properly, you can get around all that.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays where you have character creation options and things like that. If you want people to, imprint themselves on a character, that's not the right word, but put a bit of themselves into that that character's position, then let them create that character and give them that kind of input and all that. I get all that, I do, but for me personally, if you are trying to tell a tight narrative, explain why your character's not saying something.
Maybe it is lazy, and I am lazy, so therefore it gels well with me. One of my plasmids just lazes out onto the floor that'll do. Anyway, right. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll speak to you again soon. Oh, you son of a...
did it again.